And for more, we have Professor Song Se-ryeon from Kyung Hee University joining me in the studio today. Welcome to the program.
Good to be here.
So like we heard in the report, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton has said that President Trump had suggested a big deal to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Now, he also said the complete denuclearization includes its ballistic missile program as well as chemical and biological weapons. What do you think this big deal entailed?
Right. Bolton, as you know, is a leading skeptic of the North Korea's intentions and also very hawkish about this whole situation. So the way it described seems like they want the denuclearization now. And it includes, as you described, a complete denuclearization and the shedding of all the weapons that they have. But from North Korea's point of view, they are not ready to accept that speed, I guess. They essentially wanted a Yeongbyeon dismantlement with the lifting of sanctions. I think that would have been a pretty weak suggestion from the North Korea, but at the same time, if you look at the U.S.'s big deal proposal, that's something that North Korea cannot accept at this point because, you know, North Korea will be around even long after Blue House has a new president and White House has a new president. So North Korea, at the minimum, will probably want some assurance of the regime that will not end up Kim Jong-un being like Gaddafi.
So Bolton also called North Korea's concession involving the shutdown of the Yeongbyeon nuclear complex very limited. In exchange for the lifting of sanctions. In your view, what's Yeongbyeon like as a bargaining chip?
Well, I think the two sides have their own rationales, I think. From the U.S.'s point of view, okay, Yeongbyeon is a facility that is outdated at this point, maybe a limited value, so it's at best a symbolic value. What about the stockpiles that they have? What about so inventories and inspections? Those are not addressed on the table, so it would be extremely unsatisfactory for the Donald Trump. But I think what North Korea is saying is that, look, we want to go to that route of denuclearization, but we have to build the trust. We cannot give up everything at this point for merely lifting of sanctions at this point. So I think that it's a matter of a speed, but I think the deeper suspicion or the question is whether North Korea is willing to, at some point, completely go denuclearization.
Do you think we should be taking note that it's actually John Bolton that's talking about this big deal? I mean, he's a hardliner on North Korea, and given that he made no public remarks during the Hanoi summit we saw last week, how should we be looking at his presence back on the scenes in terms of North Korea issues?
I think it's Bolton and also Pompeo, too. Remember that Pompeo was the director of the CIA, and we have heard the reports that the U.S. intelligence has concluded that the North Korea has been expanding its nuclear program, and there are other facilities, notably underground facilities, that are also working on the nuclear program still. So given that situation, probably denuclearization has to involve inventories and inspection to a very detailed degree. For that reason, Bolton has been saying some nasty things about the North Korea, deservedly so. And at this point, probably at this point of the negotiation especially, Donald Trump saw some reason and saw some value to take the advice of the hawkish faction because he thinks that the time is on his side, and also by showing the resolve to walk away from the deal, probably it's a good message or strong message to North Korea.
So he did continuously say that he's not in a rush, and this won't be the first meeting, the last meeting. South Korea and the U.S. have kicked off a new week-long combined exercise called Dongmeng that replaced the springtime key resolve drills. Now, it's scaled down compared to what it was before, and North Korea has long been critical of these joint drills, calling them war games. What did you make of the announcement, especially that it came after the summit had broken down?
Right. It addresses two different aspects of the military exercise as reported. One is Donald Trump has been complaining about the expense aspect of it for a long time. So it serves purpose of scaling down the expenditure. But at the same time, the main purpose of the military exercise probably is to show a power to the opponent and maybe bring them to a palatable situation, like bringing them to the table. Of course, with the benefit of getting the military personnel in sync in preparation for any the warlike situations. But the important aspect of the military exercise has been already accomplished, arguably, because they are in the midst of a negotiation. So there's no need to escalate the provocation at this point. So I think that it just suits the purpose to scaling it down by leaving the top, the brass of both sides of the military to work on the making the matches, making the strategies to go in by using the computer simulation, but at the same time kind of keeping it quiet with the physical side of the exercise so that we're not going to be sending them, North Korea, any wrong message at this point or unnecessarily escalate the tension.
So like you said, there's a cost factor and the fact that it reduces tensions with North Korea, but do you think it will have any implications, though, in terms of perhaps military readiness?
I think that that's the concern that some experts actually express. If the physical part of the exercise is forever gone, probably it will have incremental and also at some point very detrimental effect on the military readiness. But given this situation at this point, in the midst of the negotiation, there's no need to escalate the tension. Probably skipping one or two might not cause too much damage if the top brass of the military can work on the in-syncing their strategies and moves by using the computer simulation.
So the defense authorities say that it's part of efforts to keep these dialogue, the denuclearization talks ongoing. If North Korea does make a response to the cancellation, what kind of statement do you think it will make?
Well, I think the usual rhetoric will be there. In any kind of military situation, they will criticize it. But I think that they would know that the key message of a scaling down is a willingness of continuing the negotiation. So I think they will welcome that, but they will not say it.
So we'll have to see what they say there. But President Trump seemingly has his plate full in terms of domestic issues as well, not to mention his former lawyer's testimony. He made a speech at a conservative political conference during the weekend where he spent the majority of his 2-hour speech focusing on domestic issues, just about 5 minutes on North Korea.
Right.
So would you say that we can clearly see that North Korea issues are not a top priority for the president at the moment, but when he does make his next move, what do you think it will be regarding Pyongyang?
Well, Donald Trump has a very big domestic issues and problems. The Democrat has taken the reign in the House, and the investigation is moving along, and he is genuinely looking at the possibility of impeachment being a center stage in the Congress. Indictment, maybe not for himself because of the guidelines, but maybe for his adult children, and his economic interest might be severely damaged. So I think that the domestic issue takes up most of his time, and that's reflected in the proportion of his speech. But at the same time, because of that, I think Donald Trump at some point would like to have a big win, like securing a world peace by having a successful negotiation with the North Korea, because he has been saying that you cannot impeach your president if the president is doing a good job. And one of the good jobs he would rather out would be, I secure the world peace by having a successful negotiation. So if you look at it from that point, Donald Trump could not have accepted North Korea's proposal of a Yeongbyeon for the lifting of the sanctions because it is too weak. He would rather look for a substantial deal to come down the pike so that he can waive it in front of those critics, and if the domestic situation gets worsened, probably that will be one of the escape hatch that we will have.
So he is interested in winning the Nobel Peace Prize. What move do you think Kim will make next? Do you think you will see him warming up to his neighbors a little bit more, turning to China or possibly South Korea?
I think that all those routes would be in his plate. I think he will lean more on the moon, and expect the moon to play the role that he has been playing by making a kind of a peacemaker, and China by having China as an alternative or the kind of white knight has been very important for North Korea, so it'll continue with that. But I think that what North Korea would do is look at what is happening in the domestic situation of the U.S. because the Donald Trump's willingness to get into or look for a big result or a deal would escalate if his domestic situation worsens. So I think he would carefully look for an opportunity where he and Donald Trump will kind of cooperate to scratch each other's back for lifting of sanctions on the north side, but giving Donald Trump, in exchange for that, giving Donald Trump a big win to escalate or elevate his status in the domestic stage in the U.S.
So we now know how far apart Washington and Pyongyang are in these denuclearization talks, and it's without a doubt South Korea has a much important role in mediating or facilitating these talks going forward. Now, President Moon convened a meeting of the National Security Council on Monday where he stressed the importance of Seoul's role once again, and he called on his aides to draw up measures that could possibly close the gap between the two sides. How do you think, what sort of move do you think he will make going forward?
Well, I think his role would be very important, continuously important, but the characteristics of what kind of role he could play would be a little bit different, I think. What I mean by it is that now that because of the setback that we have, the added kind of advantage that we have, if you look for silver lining, is that the big issue or the core issue has been crystallized. And that issue has to do with the trust, but also at the time, what kind of roadmaps we have to address the complete denuclearization, but at the same time building up the trust, which I think requires a very careful and laborious amount of work to have the roadmap that can be acceptable to North Korea and the U.S. From North Korea's point of view, he has to be satisfied with the peace regime or the security regime that he's handed to, even without regard to whoever is in Blue House, whoever is in White House going down in the future. So that kind of specificity and that kind of detailed roadmap, I think it requires a lot of time spent from the working groups, a lot of time poring over the details. And that is something that President Moon can suggest, President Moon can work on, so that he can satisfy both sides to come to the table again.
So heavy shoulders for South Korean President Moon Jae-in. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.